Hey guys, it's Natasha and you're watching Natasha's Creations. So, before I get started, just want to say that Flo passed away. Yeah, she was a really good fish. She had a huge personality. She's kind of a diva, but like I loved her. I know a lot of people are probably gonna think like it's just a fish, like get over it. But how many of you have actually had a fish last over 3 years? And like we lived together in a tiny little dorm for most of the time. I always had her tank either like near my bed or at my desk. And yeah, anyone who seriously has owned fish knows that you do bond with them and they bond with you and they have personalities and they're not just wall ornaments. So yeah, it's pretty sad. On that note, this video is super serious. I know I don't get a ton of people watching my videos, but I'm hoping that the right people will see this and get something out of it because it's a really important topic and I'm trying to raise awareness on a condition that is super rare and that a lot of doctors don't even think exists. So yeah, and I'm also wearing purple because that's the color for the awareness campaign for this condition. It's called superior mesenteric artery syndrome. But this is a story time of how I found out I had it and treated it. So, just some background information. I've always been super skinny. Like, since I was born, it's just how I am. Like, the doctors never really cared until all of a sudden, I don't know if I like lost a couple pounds or something my junior year of high school, but my doctor, my pediatrician, who I've been seeing since I was born, randomly started accusing me of having an eating disorder, started threatening my mom that I needed to like get treated for it. It was getting like really bad for this entire year. And we eventually stopped going to see him because he would get really angry at all of my appointments and was making us super uncomfortable. But he did convince us to go to this outpatient eating disorder treatment center. And so I went to that and they evaluated me, and at the time I hadn't been diagnosed with anxiety. So I think they saw like those symptoms, especially revolving around being a perfectionist, and decided that I must have an eating disorder. But I wasn't restricting, I wasn't making myself throw up. So they didn't classify it as like anything specific. They diagnosed me with EDNOS, which is like eating disorder not otherwise specified. So I was treated for that for my entire junior year, even though I didn't have an eating disorder. And like it got to the point where like I could identify with a lot of the symptoms like panic attacks and like anxiety and like anxious thoughts. So I thought like maybe I do have this. And it was really confusing because like I wasn't actually like my eating wasn't disordered, but I don't know, they were really convincing. And I had a teacher at school who had her own mental health issues, and I guess the counselors told her about my eating disorder, so she kind of like took me under her wing for the year. And it was really nice. Like I would like hang out with her after class and like talk to her. And I wasn't the only one who like did that. She had like other kids come in and tell her about their problems. Like she was really awesome. She ended up having like a mental breakdown about halfway through the year and quit. So I never saw her again, but she was really awesome and I really appreciated that. But yeah, it was really weird. And then they sent me to like a therapist who was so pretentious. Like I hated her. She was so rude. And eventually, I don't remember exactly what happened. I think we all just kind of like snapped out of it and realized like wait, there's something physically wrong with you because like I was getting stomach aches and stuff, but like I didn't have an eating disorder. So we stopped going to the therapist, and I think I went to like one day of the outpatient treatment and I hated it. Like I didn't feel like I belonged there because everyone else had this problem that I didn't have. So I stopped going there, and everything just kind of died down for a while until July, right before my senior year. I remember it was like around 4th of July because I was like planning on going to fireworks or something, and I had this migraine, and then I was sitting there eating ramen when my stomach started hurting really badly. And I've had like stomach issues in the past. Like I've had a gastroenterologist since I was born, so like, stomach ache wasn't that rare for me. But then I started projectile vomiting and I could not stop, and that was super scary. So they brought me to the ER, and as soon as I got there and was like brought into the little room, they read my chart and saw that I had an eating disorder. So they said there's something they could do and sent me home. Just like that. So the next day, we went to see my gastroenterologist because we were going on a trip to Maine that weekend. It was like me, my mom, cousins, some extended family, and my boyfriend at the time. So, yeah, we were like, is there anything we can do? Like, am I going to be okay to go on this trip? And my gastroenterologist wasn't actually there. So this new guy in the office went and saw me, and I hated him. From like the moment I saw him, he was probably just as bad as the therapist they sent me to in terms of like being super pretentious and not ever listening to me and not taking me seriously. And so I guess he also came from a background of like dealing with people with eating disorders, and he saw that I had one, so he treated me like that and said there was nothing wrong with me, sent me off with like some Zofran for the nausea, and said I could just go to Maine. By the way, Zofran is what they give to like pregnant women and chemo patients to deal with nausea, and it doesn't even work for me. Like, that's how bad this was. Or maybe I just took it so much that year that I'm immune to it now. But anyway, so we went to Maine, we got all set up the next day, and I was feeling awful. And the entire way there, we kept having to stop so I could throw up on the side of the road. That's how bad it was. And as soon as we got up to where we were staying, I went straight to the ER, and luckily they took me a little more seriously. They admitted me into the hospital and told me that it was just a migraine, that like the headache part had gone away, but now it was affecting my stomach. So they put me on like a saline drip or whatever it's called, and I felt a lot better. I was not throwing up. I could keep some food down as long as the saline was running, which was weird because as soon as like it would stop, I would get all nauseous again. And so I was there for I think a couple nights, and they released me because they saw that I was fine, and because I wasn't really from there, I had to go home soon. And as soon as I got out, I felt awful again. I think the only thing I could keep down that day was like a popsicle that I had at this amusement park we went to. And I just kept getting worse throughout the day. So that night, in like the middle of the night, my mom took me and my boyfriend and left the rest of the family in Maine and drove us all the way back to our house. And as soon as we got back, they called an ambulance and they took me away on a stretcher because I was in so much pain. It was awful. Again, once they put like the saline in me, like in the ambulance, I was totally fine. I was like talking to like the EMTs and stuff. It was actually really cool once I felt better because it was like my first ride in an ambulance. So it was an experience. But I got to the hospital, and again, they saw my chart and said they could do nothing because it was just an eating disorder. And one of the nurses was like, oh, it's probably just a stomach bug. Like, she gave me some salines, not salines, some saltine crackers and a ginger ale, and they sent me on my way again. But the next day, I was even worse. So my mom just sent me straight to my gastroenterologist, who was luckily back. and he saw me and immediately admitted me into the hospital because his office was like connected to the hospital. So I got to bypass the whole ER and all those people who didn't care. And they started doing a ton of tests. And I remember there was this resident or intern or something, whatever like the medical students who work at a hospital are called. And she suggested that we perform an upper GI, which, if you've never had one, it's basically like a series of x-rays. And you're put into like this like weird positions and you have to drink this really gross white barium, like just straight. I don't even think they put any flavor in it or anything. Like they just made me drink it. And it was disgusting. They were doing the test and it was the radiologist and a whole like little crowd of interns surrounding him. And I remember he like looked like Einstein and had the accent and everything, which was really funny. And so he went into like the room to look at the pictures, and he was being like super normal for most of this time, but all of a sudden, like my mom and I hear him screaming, like not screaming, but like calling out to his like little interns and saying like, you guys have to see this. You're never gonna see this again in your life. It's a once in a lifetime thing. This is amazing. Like, oh my God. My mom and I are just like, well, what is going on? And of course, they don't tell us anything because the radiologist doesn't say anything to you. They wait until the doctor tells you. So they wheeled me back to my hospital room and we waited for my doctors to come in. And they came in and explained to me that I had superior mesenteric artery syndrome, or SMA for short. And if I could find like an infographic or something that, like a picture to show you, I will put that in here. But what it is like, so there's the duodenum, which is the part that connects your stomach to your intestines. So like let's say my finger is like the duodenum. And then you have these arteries, these mesenteric arteries that go around your duodenum. And usually there's like a little piece of fat that kind of buffers them from touching. But I guess I didn't have that fat. And so basically my arteries were crushing my duodenum, and that was preventing food from going down and giving me a ton of pain. It felt like, I don't know, like a knife stabbing you constantly, and even vomiting hurt. Oh my God, it was awful. Like, I actually haven't really talked about this much since then or thought about it because every time I tried, I would get a stomach ache or feel nauseous just from like the memory of it. So I'm a little blurry on some of the details, but I remember it just being awful. So the first question out of my mouth after they told us this was, is there a surgery to fix this? And they said no. They said all they can do is try to grow that little piece of fat back. So they just gave me a feeding tube, and that was it. They were just going to monitor my weight for a while and remove the tube when I was feeling better. They also didn't know what caused this. They said it was just based on my weight. I don't know. But that didn't really make much sense to me, and it wasn't until years later that I did some more research on this, and I found that in 2014 some doctors discovered that it is related to scoliosis. And when I was in elementary school, like the nurse would check us all for scoliosis, and they always said that I had it, but then I would go to my doctor and they would check me and say I was fine. So I mean, this might have been related to that. Who knows? It could have also just been me being super skinny, which is also just who I am. I have a high metabolism, so there's really not much I can do about that, unfortunately. But the feeding tube, so that was so traumatizing. They didn't give me like a regular NG tube, which just goes into your stomach. They had to give me an NJ tube, which goes down into your intestines. And they don't put you to sleep for this because they need you to like swallow the tube and help them out while they're putting it in. So they just gave me a bunch of sedatives that did nothing for me. They put me on like this table, and started sticking this tube up my nose, which is super painful. Like, things should not go up your nose. And I don't know, the whole time I was like screaming and like writhing in pain. The nurses were holding me down. It felt like I was in some horror movie with like a mad scientist. And I remember just passing out as soon as they were done and I was being wheeled back to my room. It was awful. So I had the tube for almost a year after that. And after I could eat again, they sent me home. And I remember spending the next semester in and out of the hospital. So like once a month, for some reason, whenever I got my period, I would start vomiting again and like, the pain would be really bad and I couldn't eat. So they would send me back to the hospital and I'd be there for like a week until I was feeling better and then I'd go back home. And I had to go through the ER every time, so it was really annoying. And then there was school. So this was my senior year. School started and they didn't want me back at school. So there were a ton of meetings that my mom and I had to go to with like the administrators, superintendent, principal, the deans, some of my teachers, the nurse, because they were afraid of the feeding tube. Like they didn't want to touch it, even though my doctors and like the doctor's notes and everything all told them they had no reason to ever touch the feeding tube. They didn't have to do anything with it. No one had to train them. Like my mom had been specifically trained to use this feeding tube. We knew what we were doing. My mom wasn't at school with me, obviously, but like I knew what I was doing. They gave me like a backpack to put it in while I was at school, and I had like the stand to wheel it around at home. But yeah, like we were all set, and they were freaking out, and eventually they let me come back. But then they made me drop all the classes, well, most of them, that I was really excited for senior year because they thought the workload would be too hard. So they put me in these easy classes, and I remember having teachers like literally tell me I shouldn't be in that class because it was way too easy for me. And I'm like, yeah, why don't you tell them that, because I don't want to be in this class. So yeah, I missed out on like a lot of classes that I wanted to take, and they made me quit the outdoor adventure club and track, even though my doctor said that I could run and hike perfectly fine. Like the feeding tube was not going to affect that, and I was healthy enough to do so. So I was also in the play, and I had this like small role, but I was really excited about it. And they gave me an understudy, which I thought was just for the summer while I missed a few rehearsals, but she ended up actually taking the role and was even in the group picture, like the cast picture that I missed out on, which I was so mad about. And I know that sounds super petty, but theater can be pretty petty, and I was a theater kid, so yeah, I got wrapped up in all that drama, and I did not like this girl. She was also just, I don't know, like she thought she was better than everyone, and she was a freshman. And I got really mad because they only let me do a few of the shows, even though I was home, I wasn't in the hospital, I was perfectly healthy, and I could do it, but they didn't let me, which really pissed me off. And to be honest, I think I left the school on a really bad note with a lot of the administrators. They knew how angry I was with them, and like I see them now and they like try to be all nice to me and stuff, but like they can't make up for making me miss half of the stuff going on my senior year. But the things that I did get to participate in, like my classes and some outside of school, but like still school related activities like dances and like Halloween party and stuff, I participated in with a vengeance. Like I went all out. I was not gonna let this illness ruin it for me, and I was kind of trying to prove to them that like I was totally fine and could do all these things, and I was, and I could. And they didn't really ever believe me, but like there was nothing that was going to stop me from having a senior year, even though I did spend a lot of that year in the hospital, which made me miss some things, which I am still kind of bitter about. But I'm not going to get into all that because that's not really about this story. So the reason that I am making this video now is because today, Sunday, is the anniversary of my surgery. Yes, the surgery that they told me did not exist. I finally was able to have a duodenojejunal bypass surgery, which is basically like, I don't know, they moved my intestines around and kind of bypassed the area that was being obstructed by the arteries. So I had that done on December 3rd, 2012. They took the feeding tube out and I was totally fine. And I remember after the surgery, like they wouldn't let me eat or drink anything for a while, and as soon as I could, I chugged this water because I was so thirsty from not eating or drinking for a long time, and I threw up. And that scared me so badly because I didn't have the feeding tube anymore to like back me up if I didn't eat enough. And I had just had surgery, so I should be fine. And I was like, why am I still throwing up? So that like really just traumatized me for some reason. And I couldn't eat at all. Like I wouldn't eat anything the entire time I was in the hospital, and they wouldn't release me until I ate. And then when I did eat, it was always like really tiny things. There was no reason for me to not eat. I think I just didn't trust my body, or maybe my brain was just traumatized the whole experience, so it just didn't want to eat. Like it didn't want to touch food or anything. It was terrified. So I eventually got the feeding tube back. I don't think it was as traumatizing when they put it in this time. I think I was fine because I don't actually remember it. And I spent the holidays in the hospital, and then in January they transferred me to the med psych unit of another hospital in another state. And I spent 2 months there, and it was awful. I mean, it was bittersweet because I met a lot of great people there that I became really good friends with, and even though we weren't really allowed to like keep in touch afterwards for some reason, we all like became friends on Facebook and stuff. And it was just, I don't know, everyone there was really great, and a lot of the mental health workers were also super nice and bonded with them. I was there for so long that they had this system where if you were like good for a while, you get like certain points, then you get like different privileges, and eventually you'd even get to run like the meetings. I was there for so long that I didn't even go through the whole system. I just got to run a bunch of meetings, and I think it was also the oldest because I was 17, and there were kids as young as 8 and like as old as 17. There were like a lot of teenagers, but there were some kids, but I was still the oldest throughout my entire time there. But that didn't really matter because we all got along so well. I made a really good friend there who was released a little while before me and ended up committing suicide a couple of days after he was released. That was awful. This was like the sweetest kid. He was like my little brother there. Yeah. So, I started gaining weight pretty rapidly while I was there. They were kind of treating me with like a weird kind of eating disorder. Like they didn't say I was anorexic or bulimic, and they didn't have me on like the same kind of regimen as the other kids there with eating disorders, but they did have me on a specific meal plan, and they would weigh me all the time and make sure that I ate. So I gained a lot of weight really quickly, but they still weren't releasing me, and a lot of kids were leaving, and I wasn't sure why I was still there. And to this day, I still don't know what they were thinking, because at one point I like snuck a peek at my scale because they weren't allowed to show you, and I saw that I was at like 107 pounds, which was higher than I'd ever been in my entire life. And during this whole illness, I was in like the 80s and 90s. So I had gained a lot of weight and I was doing really well. So I didn't know why they were keeping me there. And I remember telling my family, and they ended up getting like a lawyer or something, and they fought really hard to finally get me out of there. And on Valentine's Day, my mom took me out of that hospital. I didn't even do the outpatient program or anything. Like I just went home. Like I was so done with this, and so was she and my whole family. And yeah, that weekend after I got home, because I think Valentine's Day was like a Wednesday or Thursday, that weekend was when my mom passed away. She had lupus and was really sick, and she was like with me at that hospital the entire time I was there, so she didn't really get to come home much and get her chemo treatment. So she also got very sick, and that was really hard. Um, But yeah, so they sent me home with an NG tube, which is the kind that just goes into your stomach. They took out the feeding tube, the NJ tube, and they like taught me and my mom how to like put it in and out. So I only needed to like use the feeding tube if I wasn't eating enough or if I had thrown up. And they sent me home with a meal plan too, so I was on a super strict diet to like keep gaining weight. And even when I started college, I had to like make sure that I could eat snacks in class and that I was eating 3 meals and 3 snacks a day. And I tried to like not do too much exercise while I was there, so I had like my scooter and I don't know, just things to like help me get around. And that was a whole other story because the school was really weird about that too. But that is my story with SMA. Super long, and I hope that you watch till the end because it's a really important story. And like I said, this condition is super rare. There aren't even a lot of doctors in the world that know how to treat it, and there were none in my area of the United States. So my entire treatment was really iffy and full of trial and error. And I remember my mom and I would like bring in research that we had done to the doctors. I had a whole team of doctors following me, and it wasn't like an SMA specialist did my surgery. It was just like a regular gastrointestinal surgeon. So to be honest, I don't even know if that went well or not. I think there was like some problem with it during the surgery, but they went around and fixed it. I don't know. But since then, I've been fine. I haven't had that pain since I got out of the mental hospital. I don't know, I guess trauma or something. I was still getting like the pain and nausea even after the surgery for a while. But I'm fine now. My weight still fluctuates. I'm still not at like my ideal weight, but I am healthy, so I guess it's not like a huge deal, except that I still have a lot of doctors and my therapist and psychiatrist that I got when I was going through this whole thing still bother me about my weight. And to be honest, I think I blame them for a lot of my social anxiety because I I don't know, like I don't like eating in front of people because I keep thinking that they're judging me, like thinking that I'm not eating enough, even though a lot of them are like strangers or like friends that don't really like care how much I eat, like as long as I eat. And uh yeah, I just have that like thought in my head, so I always have to like distract myself while I eat so that I don't feel like sick. Which is just like an anxiety thing. Like I don't have anything physically wrong with me, but I do think that it's like that all of this is to blame for that. And I went through a whole time when I just hated doctors because I thought they were all stupid and didn't know what they were doing. And to be honest, if they hadn't found this and had just kept treating me like I had an eating disorder when I didn't, they would have killed me. Like, I never would have gotten any treatment for SMA, and I would have just died, and it would have been all their fault. And I know that sounds awful to say, but I'm still pretty mad about it. And this was 5 years ago. Um, so, moral of the story is be your own advocate when it comes to your health because doctors don't know everything. And if you know there's something wrong with you, you know your body better than anyone. So you need to speak up and keep fighting no matter what they say. And if a doctor doesn't listen to you and doesn't take you seriously, get another doctor because that's not a good sign in a doctor. They really should take their patients seriously and not act like they know everything when they don't. I don't know, I guess that's my whole story. It was super long, so congrats on watching it and listening to it. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a good day. Goodbye.